Most people in the building never noticed him. He came in before sunrise, when the sky was still pale and the streets were quiet. By the time the first wave of office workers rushed through the glass doors with coffee cups in their hands, he had already wiped down the lobby floors and emptied the trash bins near the entrance. He moved with steady steps, never too fast, never too slow. His name badge rested on his chest, but hardly anyone read it. He was a single father in his mid-30s, raising his 8-year-old daughter on his own. Life had not turned out the way he once imagined. Years ago, he had dreams that felt bright and full of promise. Now his days were filled with cleaning supplies, long hallways, and the quiet hum of vacuum cleaners. Still, he never complained. Every morning started the same way. He woke up before his daughter, made her breakfast, and packed her lunch in a small pink box she insisted on using every day. He braided her hair the best he could, even though it took him months to learn how to do it neatly. At first it came out crooked, and she would laugh and say, "It's okay, Dad." Now he had gotten better. Not perfect, but better. After walking her to the school bus stop, he would head to work. The office building where he worked stood tall in the center of the city. It was modern, with shiny floors and wide windows that showed the skyline. Inside, people wore sharp suits and spoke in confident voices. They talked about meetings, numbers, and plans for the future. He listened sometimes while cleaning nearby, but he rarely joined in. Not because he could not understand, but because no one expected him to. To them, he was just the janitor. But there was more to him than the uniform he wore. In the quiet hours of the night, after his daughter had finished her homework and fallen asleep, he would sit at an old upright piano in their small apartment. The piano had scratches on its sides and one key that stuck if pressed too hard. It had been moved from one place to another over the years, surviving every change life threw at them. He would press the keys softly at first, careful not to wake the neighbors. The sounds filled their small living room with something warm and alive. His fingers moved naturally, like they remembered something his mind tried to forget. Music had once been his world. When he was younger, he studied piano seriously. He practiced for hours every day. His teachers said he had a rare gift. They believed he would perform on big stages one day. He believed it too. He remembered the feeling of sitting in a large hall, the bright lights above him, and the silence before the first note. That silence had always felt powerful. But life does not always follow the plan we make. A sudden loss changed everything. The woman he loved, the mother of his child, passed away after a short illness. One moment they were planning their future together. The next, he was standing in a hospital hallway holding his daughter's small hand, trying to stay strong while his world felt like it was breaking apart. Grief came quietly at first. Then it stayed. Bills piled up. Savings ran out. Music, which once brought joy, began to feel heavy. He needed stable work. He needed something that would pay the rent and keep food on the table. So he took the first job he could find. That job was cleaning offices at night. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Just for a few months. Just until things got better. But months turned into years. He became good at his work. He learned which floors needed extra care and which managers were particular about their desks. He fixed small problems before anyone noticed them. If a light flickered, he reported it. If a spill happened, he cleaned it before it stained. He did his job with pride. Some employees were kind. They would nod and say thank you. A few even asked about his daughter. But many walked past him without looking up from their phones. He understood. People were busy. They had their own worries. Still, there were moments when he felt invisible. Sometimes, during his break, he would sit in the empty lobby. In one corner stood a beautiful grand piano. It was mostly decorative, polished, and rarely used. It had been placed there to make the building look elegant. He often glanced at it while sipping his coffee from a paper cup. He never touched it. Not because he did not want to, but because it felt like it belonged to a different world. A world he once knew but no longer felt part of. One evening, as he cleaned near the lobby, his daughter called him on his phone. "Dad, can you listen to the song I learned today?" she asked. He smiled, stepping into a quiet corner, so he could hear her clearly. She hummed a simple tune she had practiced in music class. It was not perfect, but it was full of excitement. "That's beautiful," he told her honestly. "You kept the rhythm very well." "Did I really?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I'm proud of you." He meant it. After the call ended, he stood there for a moment, holding the phone. His eyes drifted again to the grand piano across the room. For a brief second, he imagined sitting there and playing something for her one day. Something that would make her eyes widen with surprise. Then the elevator doors opened, and the sound of busy footsteps pulled him back to reality. There were days when exhaustion hit him hard. Raising a child alone meant there was no one to share the late-night worries with. If his daughter had a fever, he stayed awake. If she struggled with homework, he sat beside her until she understood. If she missed her mother, he held her while she cried, even when he felt like crying too. But he never let her see how tired he truly was. To her, he was steady, safe, always there. On weekends, they sometimes visited a small park nearby. She would run toward the swings, and he would sit on a wooden bench watching her laugh. Those moments reminded him why he kept going. One Saturday, she asked, "Dad, why don't you play at big concerts anymore?" He was quiet for a second. "Life changed," he answered gently. "But that's okay. Some music is meant just for us." She seemed to accept that. Children often do. Back at work, rumors began spreading about the company's upcoming annual event. It was a big celebration, held in the lobby with decorations, food, and speeches from top leaders. Employees were excited. There would be music, lights, and guests from outside the company. He listened as they talked while he cleaned the nearby hallway. "They're bringing in a live band this year," someone said. "And the CEO will give a special speech," another replied. He continued wiping the glass doors, careful not to leave streaks. Events like that meant extra work for him. More people meant more mess. But he did not mind. He had grown used to being present but unseen during important moments. A few days before the event, he arrived early and noticed workers moving equipment into the lobby. At the center of the room stood the grand piano, freshly polished, shining under the lights. He paused longer than usual that morning. For a brief second, the noise around him faded. His fingers twitched slightly, almost as if they missed the feel of real ivory keys under stage lights. Then he adjusted his gloves and picked up his mop. Work needed to be done. He told himself he was content. He had a roof over his head. His daughter was healthy. They laughed together most nights. That was enough. And yet, deep inside, a small part of him still carried the memory of applause. Not for fame, not for praise, but for connection. For the way music could reach people without a single word. He did not know that soon, that grand piano in the lobby would no longer be just a decoration. For now, he remained what everyone believed him to be. Just the janitor. The week of the company's annual event arrived faster than anyone expected. The building felt different. There was more noise, more movement, more excitement in the air. Employees who usually rushed past each other now stopped to talk about outfits, guest lists, and after-party plans. Large boxes of decorations were stacked near the elevators. Bright banners were rolled out across the lobby floor. For him, it meant longer hours. He stayed late almost every night that week. Chairs had to be arranged in perfect rows. Glass walls had to shine without a single mark. The marble floor in the lobby needed to reflect the lights like a mirror. He worked quietly, focused, careful not to miss any detail. On Wednesday evening, as he wiped down the long reception desk, a group of young employees stood nearby talking loudly. "I heard this year is going to be huge," one of them said. "Investors are coming. And the CEO wants everything perfect," another added. He kept his eyes on his work. Someone noticed him looking toward the center of the lobby where the grand piano stood. "Hey," one of them called out playfully, "you like the piano?" He gave a small polite smile. "It's a nice instrument. You play?" The same voice asked, half serious, half joking. He paused for just a second. "A little," he answered softly. The group exchanged amused looks. Maybe we'll have you perform at the party. One of them laughed. The others chuckled. He nodded politely, not taking it personally. He had grown used to jokes like that. Most people didn't mean harm. They simply saw him through one narrow window and never wondered if there was more. That night at home, his daughter was sitting on the living room floor coloring when he walked in. "You're late," she said, looking up. "Big event at work," he replied, placing his keys on the table. "Everyone wants it perfect." "Will you see famous people?" she asked with wide eyes. He smiled. "Probably just people in suits." She giggled. After dinner, she asked him to play something for her. He sat at the old upright piano and began a soft melody. She closed her eyes and leaned against the couch, listening carefully. "You should play at your work party," she said suddenly. He stopped for a moment. "Why would I do that?" "Because you're the best," she answered without hesitation. He laughed quietly. "I'm not sure they need me for that." But her words stayed with him longer than he expected. Friday finally came. He arrived at the building earlier than usual. The sky was still gray, and the air was cold. Inside, the lobby looked almost magical. Lights were strung across the ceiling. Round tables covered in white cloth filled the space. The grand piano stood in the center, polished so carefully it almost glowed. He walked past it slowly, pushing his cart. For a brief moment, he imagined what it would feel like to sit there while everyone watched. His hands tightened slightly around the cart handle. Then he kept moving. By late afternoon, employees began changing into formal clothes. Laughter echoed down the hallways. Perfume and cologne replaced the usual smell of office air. He stayed in his uniform. He planned to finish his tasks and leave before the event became crowded. That was usually how these nights went. But just as he was about to clock out, his supervisor stopped him. "We might need you to stay a bit longer," the supervisor said, "in case of spills or anything urgent." He nodded. "Of course." So he stayed. The party began with loud music and bright lights. Guests filled the lobby, holding drinks and small plates of food. Conversations overlapped, creating a steady buzz of sound. Laughter rose and fell like waves. He stood near the sidewall, out of the way, watching carefully in case someone needed assistance. On the small stage near the back, a microphone was set up for speeches. The grand piano remained untouched for now, waiting quietly under the lights. As the night went on, people grew more relaxed. Ties loosened. Shoes were kicked off under tables. The music playing through speakers became louder. The same group of young employees from earlier in the week gathered near the piano. They were holding drinks and speaking louder than necessary. One of them looked over and spotted him standing against the wall. "There he is," the voice called out. He straightened slightly, unsure what they wanted. "Come here," another said, waving him over. He hesitated, then walked toward them. "Yes?" he asked politely. "You said you play a little, right?" One of them grinned. "A little," he repeated. "Well, our band is taking a short break," someone said. "Why don't you give us a show?" The tone was playful, but there was a sharp edge underneath it. A few nearby guests turned to watch. He felt heat rise in his face. "I'm working," he said calmly. "I should stay nearby." "Oh, come on," another insisted. "It'll be funny. Just one song." A small crowd began forming, sensing entertainment. Someone handed him a microphone as a joke. "Ladies and gentlemen," the person announced dramatically, "tonight we present our very own Janitor on piano." Laughter rippled through the group. He stood still for a moment, holding the microphone awkwardly. Across the room, the CEO stood near one of the tables speaking with guests. She glanced over when she heard the laughter. He looked at the piano. It had been years since he played in front of strangers. His first instinct was to refuse and step back. It would be easier, safer. But then he remembered his daughter's voice. "Because you're the best." He slowly handed the microphone back. "If it's all right," he said quietly, "I can play something short." The group cheered, expecting a clumsy performance. He removed his work gloves and placed them carefully on top of the piano. He rolled his shoulders once, trying to release tension. When he sat down on the bench, the room still carried scattered laughter. He placed his fingers lightly on the keys. For a second he closed his eyes. The noise around him felt distant. The bright lights above him blurred into a soft glow. He took one slow breath. Then he pressed the first key. The sound was clear and pure. A few people continued talking at first, not paying attention. He played a second note, then a third. The melody began gently, almost shy. It was simple enough that anyone could follow, but rich enough to carry feeling. Gradually, conversations softened. The laughter faded. His fingers moved with growing confidence. Years of practice returned like an old friend. The stiffness in his shoulders disappeared. The noise in his mind went quiet. He was no longer the janitor standing under bright lights. He was a musician again. People turned fully toward the piano now. Someone lowered their phone, no longer recording as a joke but watching with real attention. The melody deepened. What began as something light slowly transformed into something powerful. His left hand built a steady rhythm, while his right hand carried a soaring tune that filled the entire lobby. Even those near the back stopped talking. The CEO stepped closer without realizing she had moved. The music did not sound like a joke. It sounded like a story, and everyone in the room could feel it beginning to unfold. The music continued to rise, slow and steady, like a sunrise no one expected to see. At first, people had only gone quiet out of curiosity. Now they were quiet because they did not want to miss a single note. His fingers moved across the keys with calm control. The piano no longer felt like a decoration in a large building. It felt alive under his hands. Every key responded to his touch as if it had been waiting for him. He forgot about the lights above him. He forgot about the people standing around. He forgot about the uniform he was wearing. All he could feel was the music. The melody began to change. What started soft and simple slowly grew deeper. The notes carried something heavy inside them, something that felt honest. It was not just a performance. It was memory. He thought about the hospital room from years ago, the quiet beeping machines, the way his daughter had squeezed his hand, confused and scared. He remembered standing still, trying to stay strong when everything inside him felt weak. His left hand pressed lower keys, steady and slow, like a heartbeat. The room felt the shift. A woman near the front lowered her glass carefully onto the table, afraid even the smallest sound might break the moment. One of the young employees who had joked earlier stood frozen, eyes wide, no longer smiling. The music carried sadness, but not in a way that made people uncomfortable. It was the kind of sadness everyone understood in their own way. The kind that comes from losing something important. Then gently the melody began to lift. His right hand moved higher along the keys, bringing in lighter notes. Hope slipped in quietly, almost shy at first. The rhythm grew stronger. The tune became brighter. It felt like watching someone stand back up after falling. Across the room, the CEO had stopped speaking entirely. She had moved closer without noticing. Her arms were folded loosely, but her expression had changed. There was no business look in her eyes now. Only memory. The music reminded her of her childhood home, of evenings when her father would sit at their old piano after dinner. He had not been famous. He had not played in big halls. But when he played, the whole house felt warmer. She had not thought about those evenings in years. A quiet breath escaped her lips. The melody grew fuller. He was no longer playing something rehearsed. He was creating in the moment. His hands trusted each other. One carried the steady bass. The other told the story above it. The building's tall glass windows reflected the lights, and for a second it looked like stars were shining inside the lobby. Someone near the back whispered, "Is that really him?" No one answered. The music swelled higher, stronger now. Not loud in a harsh way, but powerful. His shoulders straightened. His posture changed. There was confidence in the way he sat. He was not trying to impress anyone. He was simply being himself. The earlier laughter felt like it had happened hours ago, not minutes. One of the young employees slowly put their drink down on a nearby table. Their face had turned serious. There was a hint of guilt there too. The melody shifted again. This time it became playful, almost like a conversation. Short, bright notes danced across the keys. It felt like a child running through a park, laughing freely. His daughter's face filled his mind. He remembered the first time she tried to press the piano keys with her tiny fingers. She had laughed at the loud sound and covered her ears. He had laughed with her. The memory made his playing lighter. The crowd felt it. A few people smiled without realizing it. The heavy feeling from earlier began to lift. The sadness in the music had not disappeared, but it had changed into something softer, something healing. The CEO's eyes shimmered slightly under the lights. The piece continued to build. His fingers moved faster now, but never rushed. Every note had purpose. The rhythm remained steady, like someone walking forward with quiet determination. There was strength in it. Not loud strength, quiet strength. The kind that shows up every day without asking for attention. The kind that wakes up early, packs lunches, and keeps going even when no one is watching. He did not notice the tears forming in more than one pair of eyes in the room. He did not notice the phones slowly lowering, screens forgotten. He only noticed the music. As the piece reached its highest point, the sound filled every corner of the lobby. The high notes shimmered in the air, while the lower notes grounded them firmly. Then, slowly, gently, he began to bring it down. The rhythm softened. The tempo slowed. It felt like the end of a long day when the sky turns orange and the world becomes quiet again. The final section was simple. Just a clear, honest melody with no extra decoration. He pressed each key carefully, letting the sound linger. The last note hung in the air longer than expected. Then it faded. Silence. Not awkward silence. Still silence. For a brief second, no one moved. He opened his eyes. The world rushed back in. The lights. The crowd. The building. He suddenly became aware of his uniform again. Of his gloves resting on top of the piano. He looked up slowly. Dozens of eyes were staring at him. But they were not laughing. They were looking at him with something else entirely. Respect. The first clap came from somewhere near the middle of the room. Then another. Within seconds, the entire lobby filled with applause. It was not polite applause. It was loud, strong, real. Some people stood. The young employees who had called him over were clapping harder than anyone. One of them shook their head in disbelief. He stood up slowly from the bench, unsure what to do with his hands. The applause continued. He gave a small, humble nod. He had not played in front of a crowd in years. He had forgotten how overwhelming it could feel. But this felt different. This was not about fame. It was about being seen. The CEO stepped forward, moving through the crowd toward him. The applause softened as people noticed her approach. She stopped only a few feet away from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Her eyes were slightly red, but her voice was steady when she finally said, "That was beautiful." He lowered his gaze politely. "Thank you. You didn't just play," she continued gently. "You told a story." He hesitated, unsure how to respond. "It's been a long time," he admitted quietly. The crowd listened carefully. "A long time since you played?" she asked. "A long time since I played for anyone," he answered. Something about the honesty in his voice made the room even quieter. The CEO glanced at the piano, then back at him. "You have an extraordinary gift," she said. He shook his head slightly. "It's just music." She gave a small smile. "No, it's more than that." The applause began again, softer this time but just as sincere. He felt warmth spread across his face, not from embarrassment, but from something else. Relief. For the first time in years, he did not feel invisible. He picked up his gloves from the piano slowly. But before he could step away, someone near the front said quietly, "Play one more." The request was not a joke this time. It was a wish. He looked around the room. He saw expectation but not pressure. He saw appreciation. He sat back down gently. This time, when he placed his hands on the keys, he did not close his eyes out of fear. He closed them out of gratitude. And the music began again. The second piece began softer than the first. This time, There was no laughter before it started. No whispers. No one holding up a phone to record a joke. The room had already changed. He let his fingers rest on the keys for a brief second before pressing down gently. The sound that came out was warm and steady, like a quiet conversation between old friends. He did not play to impress anyone now. He played because he wanted to. The melody felt lighter, but deeper at the same time. Carried gratitude. Carried love. It carried the quiet strength of someone who had survived hard days and still chose kindness. The crowd leaned in without realizing it. The CEO remained near the piano, not as a boss watching an employee, but as a person listening to another human being. Her expression had softened completely. The business tone she carried earlier in the evening had disappeared. The music moved like a story about starting over. Low notes rolled gently under brighter ones. The rhythm felt steady, like footsteps walking forward without fear. There were no sharp turns in the melody, no dramatic pauses. Just honesty. A server walking past stopped mid-step and turned slowly toward the piano. Even the staff hired for the event seemed drawn into the moment. He thought about his daughter again. He imagined her sitting in the front row of a small recital hall, her legs swinging because they could not quite touch the floor. He imagined her clapping proudly, telling anyone who would listen, "That's my dad." A small smile appeared on his face while he played. The notes reflected that smile. The group of employees who had first called him over stood together now, quieter than before. One of them folded their arms, watching carefully. Another looked down at the floor for a moment, as if thinking about something they wished they could take back. But the music did not hold any anger. It held forgiveness. As the piece continued, it began to build again. Not as intense as the first performance, but stronger in a different way. Felt confident. The CEO slowly took a seat at a nearby table, never taking her eyes off him. She remembered her own early years. The long nights. The moments when she felt underestimated. The times she had walked into rooms where people doubted her before she even spoke. She understood something about quiet strength. The melody rose higher, filling the tall ceiling of the lobby. The lights reflected off the polished piano lid, making the entire scene feel almost unreal. For a moment, it no longer felt like a company event. Felt like something personal. When the second piece came to an end, the applause started immediately this time. Louder than before. More confident. People were no longer surprised. They were grateful. He stood once again, feeling his heart beating fast. Not from fear but from emotion. The CEO walked toward him slowly. "May I?" she asked softly, gesturing toward the microphone on the stage. He stepped aside respectfully. She picked up the microphone, but instead of turning toward the audience right away, she looked at him. "How long have you been working here?" she asked. "A few years," he replied. "And how long have you been playing?" He hesitated. "Since I was a child." There was a murmur in the room. She nodded thoughtfully. "Why did you stop performing?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. He looked down briefly at the piano keys. "Life changed," he said quietly. "My wife passed away. I needed steady work. I have a daughter. She comes first." The words were calm, but honest. The room felt still again. Some people lowered their heads. The earlier jokes now seemed far away and small. The CEO's expression shifted. There was no pity in her face, only respect. "You chose responsibility," she said gently. He gave a small nod. "I chose what was necessary." She turned toward the crowd then. "I think we were just reminded of something important tonight," she said into the microphone. "Talent does not always stand in the spotlight. Sometimes it works quietly after hours. Sometimes it wears a uniform we overlook." The room listened carefully. "We talk a lot about leadership in this company," she continued. "About resilience. About commitment. What we just witnessed is all of that." Applause broke out again, softer but meaningful. He felt overwhelmed. Not because of attention, but because someone had truly seen him. The CEO lowered the microphone and turned back to him. "Would you join me in my office on Monday morning?" she asked. His first thought was that he had done something wrong. but her smile was reassuring. "It's nothing bad," she added gently. "I would simply like to talk." He nodded slowly. "Of course." The rest of the evening carried a different energy after that. People approached him one by one. Some offered handshakes. Some apologized quietly for laughing earlier. Others simply said thank you. He accepted each word with humility. He did not hold onto any bitterness. He understood that sometimes people see only what is in front of them until something opens their eyes. When the event finally began to wind down, guests started leaving in small groups. The music from the speakers returned, but it felt softer now, more thoughtful. He picked up his gloves again and looked at the piano one last time before returning to his duties. There were cups to clear, tables to wipe, chairs to stack, and he did his job the same way he always had, carefully, with pride. As he worked, a few employees offered to help clean up. Something about the evening had changed their attitude. The line between titles and uniforms felt less important. Near midnight, the lobby was almost back to normal. The decorations remained, but the noise was gone. He stood alone for a moment in front of the grand piano. The building was quiet again. He reached out and gently closed the lid. "Thank you," he whispered softly, though he was not sure if he was speaking to the instrument, the moment, or something greater. When he stepped outside into the cool night air, the city lights shimmered in the distance. He felt lighter than he had in years. Not because his life had suddenly changed, but because something inside him had awakened again. At home, his daughter was already asleep on the couch, waiting for him. A small blanket covered her shoulders. He carried her carefully to her bed. As he tucked her in, she stirred slightly. "How was the party?" she mumbled. He smiled down at her. "It was special," he answered quietly. "Did you play?" she asked without opening her eyes. He paused. "Yes," he whispered. A sleepy smile crossed her face. "I knew you would," she said. He sat beside her bed for a few extra minutes that night, watching her breathe peacefully. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine that maybe life did not close doors forever. Maybe sometimes it simply waits for the right moment to open another one. He did not know what Monday morning would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never again believe that he was just a janitor. Monday morning arrived quietly. He woke up earlier than usual, even before his alarm went off. For a few seconds he lay still, staring at the ceiling. The events from Friday night replayed in his mind like a dream he was not sure had really happened. The applause, the silence before it, the look on the CEO's face. Then reality returned. He still had to make breakfast. He still had to pack a lunchbox. Life did not pause for special moments. He moved carefully through the small apartment kitchen, cracking eggs into a pan while the coffee brewed. His daughter shuffled in, rubbing her eyes. "You're up early," she said. "So are you," he replied with a soft smile. She climbed onto her chair and watched him. "Is today the day you talk to your boss?" He nodded. "Are you nervous?" she asked. He thought about it for a second. "A little." She reached across the table and placed her small hand on his arm. "You don't have to be. You were amazing." He laughed gently. "Thank you." After walking her to the bus stop, he stood there for a moment longer than usual, watching the bus disappear down the street. He took a slow breath and headed toward work. The building looked the same as always. Tall, polished, busy. But it felt different to him now. As he stepped inside, a few employees who had been at the event noticed him right away. Their reactions were subtle but clear. A nod that lasted a little longer. A quiet good morning. A small smile. One person even said, "Great performance," before stepping into the elevator. He responded politely each time, still unsure how to carry this new attention. He clocked in as usual and began his morning tasks. Emptying bins, cleaning glass doors, wiping surfaces. The routine grounded him. It reminded him that nothing had officially changed yet. At 10 minutes before 9, he removed his gloves and washed his hands carefully. He checked his reflection in the restroom mirror. His uniform was clean and pressed. He smoothed down his hair slightly. Then he walked toward the executive floor. He had rarely been there before. The carpet felt thicker under his shoes. The walls were lined with framed awards and photographs. The air seemed quieter, almost insulated from the busy floors below. The receptionist at the front desk looked up as he approached. "She's expecting you," she said kindly, gesturing toward a closed office door. His heart beat a little faster. He knocked gently. "Come in," a calm voice answered. He stepped inside. The office was spacious but not overly decorated. Large windows showed the city skyline. A bookshelf stood against one wall. A small plant rested near the desk. The CEO stood up as he entered. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Of course," he replied respectfully. She motioned for him to sit across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet was not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. "I've been thinking about Friday night," she began. He waited. "I've attended many company events," she continued. "I've heard professional musicians perform, but what you played stayed with me." He lowered his gaze slightly. "I'm glad." She leaned forward a little. "You trained professionally, didn't you?" He nodded. "I studied music when I was younger. Why didn't you continue?" He gave the same honest answer as before. "After my wife passed, I needed stable work. I had a child to raise. Music doesn't always pay bills." She listened carefully, not interrupting. "That must have been difficult," she said quietly. "It was," he admitted. "But it was also clear. My daughter comes first." A small smile appeared on her face. "That says a lot about you." He did not know how to respond to that, so he remained silent. She stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city for a moment. "This company talks about potential," she said thoughtfully. "About investing in people. I realized something Friday night. We almost overlooked someone extraordinary." He felt his chest tighten slightly. "I would like to offer you an opportunity," she said, turning back toward him. He blinked, unsure what she meant. "First," she continued, "we would like to move you into a facilities management position. Comes with better pay and more flexible hours. You've already been doing more than your job description for years." He stared at her, surprised. "And second," she added gently, "I would like to personally sponsor your return to music." He felt as if he had misheard. "Return?" he repeated softly. "Yes," she said. "Lessons, studio time, connections. Not because you need charity, but because talent like yours should not stay hidden." He swallowed slowly. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "You don't have to decide today," she replied. "But I believe your daughter deserves to see you follow your gift too. Children learn courage by watching it." Her words struck him deeply. He imagined his daughter sitting at their old piano, looking up at him with bright eyes. "I've been away from that world for a long time," he said carefully. "Talent does not disappear," she answered. "It waits." There was no pressure in her tone, only sincerity. He sat quietly, letting everything settle. For years, he had convinced himself that that chapter of his life was closed. Not because he lacked ability, but because he believed responsibility and dreams could not live in the same space. Now someone was telling him they could. "I would need to think about it," he said honestly. "Of course," she replied. "Take your time." As he stood to leave, she added one more thing. "Friday night reminded everyone here of something important," she said. "Never assume you know someone's full story." He nodded. When he stepped out of the office, the hallway felt brighter somehow. He returned to his regular floor and picked up his cart again. The wheels squeaked slightly as they always had. But inside, everything felt different. Throughout the day, word spread quietly about his meeting. Not the details, but the fact that he had been called upstairs for something positive. Several employees stopped to speak with him again. One of the young employees from Friday approached him near the elevator. "I owe you an apology," they said sincerely. "We thought it would be funny. We were wrong." He looked at them calmly. "It's all right." "No," they insisted. "It wasn't." He offered a small smile. We all make mistakes. The conversation ended with a handshake. That evening, when he returned home, his daughter ran toward him the moment he opened the door. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly. He set down his bag and crouched to her level. "They offered me a new position at work," he said. Her eyes widened. "Does that mean more money?" He laughed. "Yes." She clapped her hands. "And," he continued carefully, "they offered to help me play music again." She froze for a second. "Like, for real?" she whispered. He nodded slowly. She threw her arms around his neck so tightly he almost lost his balance. "You have to say yes," she said into his shoulder. He held her close. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel excitement about the future. Not just survival. Possibility. That night, after she fell asleep, he sat at the old upright piano once more. The keys felt familiar. But this time, when he began to play, there was something new in the sound. Hope. The weeks that followed felt both normal and completely new at the same time. He still woke up early. He still made breakfast. He still walked his daughter to the bus stop. But now there was a quiet sense of movement in his life, like something had started turning after being still for years. He accepted the new position at work. The change did not happen overnight, but slowly. He began training in facilities management. Instead of only cleaning, he was now involved in planning maintenance schedules, overseeing repairs, and making sure the building ran smoothly. He learned about systems he had only noticed from a distance before. The pay increase helped immediately. Bills felt less heavy. He was able to replace their old refrigerator without worrying for weeks about the cost. He even signed his daughter up for after-school music lessons without calculating every dollar twice. But the biggest change was not financial. It was inside him. Twice a week after work, he began taking advanced piano lessons again. Walking into the small studio the first evening felt strange. He was older than most of the students. His hands were rougher. His schedule was tighter. Yet when he sat at the piano, the years seemed to fall away. The instructor listened carefully as he played. "You never lost it," the instructor said quietly after the first session. He did not answer right away. He knew he had not lost the skill. He had only buried it. At home, the old upright piano sounded different now. Not because it had changed, but because he had. He practiced with more structure, more intention. His daughter often sat nearby doing homework, listening quietly. Sometimes she would stop writing and just watch his hands move. "You look happy when you play," she said one evening. "I feel like myself," he replied. Months passed. Word about his performance at the company event had traveled further than he expected. A short video clip, recorded by someone in the audience, had been shared online. It was not flashy. It was not edited. It simply showed a man in a work uniform playing his heart out in a lobby full of stunned employees. The comments were kind. Many people wrote about being overlooked, about hidden talents, about choosing family over dreams and wondering if it was ever too late to return. He read a few of them, then closed the app. He did not want attention. He only wanted balance. One afternoon, the CEO called him into her office again. "There is an Arts Foundation event next month," she explained. "They're raising funds for music programs in public schools. I told them about you." He felt his stomach tighten slightly. "They would like you to perform," she added. He was quiet for a moment. "This would not be a joke," she said gently. "It would be an invitation." He thought about it carefully. "I'll do it," he said finally. The night of the foundation event felt different from the company party months earlier. This time he wore a simple dark suit. It was not expensive, but it fit well. His daughter stood beside him backstage, holding his hand. "You're not nervous, are you?" she asked. "A little," he admitted. She smiled. "Good. That means it matters." When his name was announced, the applause that greeted him was warm and welcoming. He walked to the piano slowly, aware of every step. He sat down. For a second, he looked into the audience. He saw strangers. He saw supporters. He saw the CEO sitting near the front. He saw his daughter in the first row, sitting tall and proud. Then he began to play. The music was not about loss this time. It was about growth. Carried the same depth as before, but with more light. The notes rose and fell with confidence. The pauses felt intentional, not uncertain. He was no longer proving anything. He was simply sharing. The audience listened closely. When he finished, the applause was steady and long. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Respectful. After the event, several people approached him about future performances. Small venues. Community events. Nothing overwhelming. He accepted a few invitations, careful not to let his schedule take him away from home too often. His daughter attended every performance she could. One evening, after returning from a small recital at a local hall, she asked him a question. "Do you wish you had never stopped playing?" He thought carefully before answering. "If I had never stopped," he said slowly, "I might not be the same father you know." She tilted her head, thinking. "I don't regret choosing you," he continued, "but I'm grateful I don't have to choose anymore." She seemed satisfied with that answer. At work, he remained humble. Even with his new title, he still greeted the cleaning staff by name. He still helped carry supplies when someone was shorthanded. He remembered what it felt like to be unseen. The company culture shifted in small ways after that night in the lobby. Managers became more aware of the people behind the roles. Conversations grew more human. Sometimes change begins with a policy. Sometimes it begins with a song. Nearly a year after the first performance, the company held its annual event again. The grand piano stood in the center of the lobby once more. But this time there was no surprise. His name was printed clearly in the event program. He stood backstage in his suit while employees filled the room. The CEO stepped up to the microphone first. "Last year," she said, smiling toward him, "we were reminded that talent and strength can stand quietly in the background if we let them. Tonight, we celebrate not just success in business, but courage in life." She introduced him properly. The applause began before he even reached the piano. As he sat down, he noticed something that made him pause. Near the back of the room, several members of the cleaning staff stood together, smiling proudly. He gave them a small nod before placing his hands on the keys. He played a piece he had written himself. It began softly, like the early mornings he used to walk into the building unnoticed. Then it grew stronger, reflecting the moment someone believed in him. And finally, it opened wide and bright, carrying the sound of possibility. When the final note faded, the entire room stood. Not because he had once been a janitor. Not because it made for a good story. But because the music deserved it. Later that night, after the guests had left and the lobby grew quiet again, he remained for a moment near the piano. His daughter stood beside him, holding his hand. "You did it," she whispered. He looked around the lobby where he had once felt invisible. "I think we both did," he replied. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, the city lights shimmered just like they had months before. The difference now was not the lights. It was him. He understood something clearly at last. Being responsible had never meant giving up who he was. It only meant waiting for the right time to let that part of him breathe again. And sometimes, all it takes is one unexpected moment, one chance, one song, to remind the world and yourself that you were never just one thing.